Joining me to talk about it is Congressman Scott Fitzgerald, who is a member of the committee, of course. Good morning, sir. How are you?
We're fine. Yeah, we're doing well.
Good. Let's start with why have a field hearing on this issue and why in Wisconsin? We're nowhere near the southern border, of course.
Yeah, we started, Tom Tiffany, Brian Stile, myself, we started talking to Chairman Jim Jordan, probably 6 months ago about trying to set up a field hearing in the state as we started to see more and more issues emerge. Not just in Milwaukee with the crime and the uptick there, but certainly all these kind of isolated stories of other incidents around the state. And, it didn't matter where you were, which district you were in. Everyone had a story. So they said, let's continue to work on it, and we were able to pull that together for this morning.
Yeah, so your committee members are going to be hearing from a number of witnesses, hoping to discover what? I mean, how the Democrats' open borders are overwhelming even smaller towns and more rural areas. What do you take away from a field hearing like this?
Yeah, the one thing it does, it brings together kind of more of a diversity of members. So Tom McClintock from California is going to be here. Matt Gaetz is here in town. I spoke with him last night. Cliff Bentz from Oregon. And I think it definitely gives you a little bit different perspective when you kind of, those members interact with some of the witnesses that will be sworn in this morning to talk about kind of a number of different issues. But what we've seen, and what I've seen certainly, and Congressman Stile and I have been talking about it, is the impact that it's had on municipalities that certainly didn't anticipate it, right? Springfield, Ohio is probably the poster child there. But, it's been happening here. And you brought up Whitewater. Whitewater is a great example of a community, not by any significant changes that were made at the municipal level by anybody that's part of that city council or the school board. They're just, all of a sudden, we've got these non-English speaking residents, quote-unquote residents, that are having a significant impact on those communities. And certainly it's crime. It can be anything from a fender bender, right? And if you've got a non-English speaking person involved in a fender bender, it puts a ton of pressure on law enforcement. Or if you have, like Whitewater's had, 200 non-English speaking children show up for school on the first day, you don't have interpreters. You don't have the ability to just kind of, bring these kids in to a system that certainly isn't prepared for it. And this is going on across the country right now. Well,
yes, you mentioned schools. I think it's something that is really sort of underrepresented or hasn't really been nearly gotten enough attention as part of this open border crisis. How even a dozen or a few dozen foreign children can get plopped into a school district in America and become a significant new burden in terms of resources because most of them don't know English. If any of them do, they need extra attention. They're struggling to fit in. They're an entirely different culture, an entirely different home environment. The Democrats' flood of illegals here has really been a huge drain on our schools.
Absolutely. And if you talk to many members of Congress where they've lived this now for the last kind of 4 years, including myself, where you do border visit after border visit. I've been to the San Diego sector numerous times. I've been to McAllen, Texas. We've been to Tucson. Each one of those kind of opens your eyes to what's actually happening. And each section of that border is unique in the way the Border Patrol handles it and Homeland Security, depending on the amount of drugs that are coming across. So I think today what you're going to hear, and hopefully with the coverage, you'll kind of get a cross-section of, yes, the fentanyl issues at the border are real. They're making their way into northern states, certainly, as we've seen. We've got some people that are witnesses today that are going to talk about how their families have been impacted by fentanyl use. And then the other thing I want to bring up is something that emerged during the presidential debate when David Muir did a fact check on President Trump, saying that the FBI's criminal statistics are simply, it's not true that there's not an increase in violent crimes. That is wrong. Yep. And now the FBI and Christopher Wray have admitted that. So I think that's going to be part of the discussion. They've
gone back and modified that. It is important for Congress to hear directly from local officials, and among those testifying, I see Sheriff Dale Smith on the list, Eric Toney, who's a Fond du Lac County DA, Another witness is the president of the Love Logan Foundation. What is that?
Yeah, so it's a family that was directly affected with a son that was unfortunately died in an incident related to fentanyl. And the thing, Jay, is these stories are everywhere out there, and especially when you're a member, you kind of have to interact and try and get as many details as you can out of some of these instances. So yeah, we've got a parent that's going to testify this morning as well.
And we're talking with Congressman Scott Fitzgerald, of course. Crime also does increase, as you mentioned, with a large presence of illegals. As much as their advocates hate to hear it, some percentage of migrants come here planning to commit crimes and join Latin gangs or end up doing so. The government's own estimate, the Biden government's own estimate over the Biden years has been that about 1 out of every 11 illegals will end up committing some sort of crime. And as you say, some could be as little as, as minor as,
Yeah.
I want to call drunk driving minor, which is what I'm struggling at, but it could be something like drunk driving, or it could be something like murder. But 1 in every 11 illegals we found are coming up on the crime sheets. Are we seeing higher crime in these smaller communities as well? It's not just the larger cities, I assume.
No, and match that up against the defund the police movement that emerged. So at the same time you were having an increase between 2019 and 2023 in violent crimes being committed by illegals, you also have many of these major municipalities that were reducing their police force. So, that's what didn't add up in some of these crime statistics that the FBI has been rolling out as well. But I think you can, don't take my word for it, Wall Street Journal reported on this just a couple of weeks ago, that absolutely the two are linked. And, obviously that falls at the feet of Kamala Harris, who was out there, with the Minneapolis Freedom Fund, trying to get these people out on the street again. And they've had great success with doing that, unfortunately.
Yeah. I ran across a story just yesterday about how there are caravans of South Americans that total about 150 or 200,000 people. They're currently closer to the Mexico-Guatemala border, but they're making their way north in the hopes of getting into this country before January in case Trump wins the election. It's a reminder that these open borders, this basic system we're seeing here of higher crime in the big cities and even in some of these rural or smaller towns like Whitewater, because more migrants are just filtering in and settling there. It reminds us that this does not stop under Kamala Harris.
No, and if you remember back to within the first 2 weeks when the Biden administration rolled out their 40 executive orders, that somebody was preparing at the White House to actually, I guess, kind of make the point that we're going to reverse everything that Donald Trump did.
Yep.
One of the most disastrous things that came out of that was they messaged not just to those in South America, but really to the entire globe, that the American southern border is wide open and you're welcome. And that has been, if you talk to anybody on the border at Homeland Security or Border Patrol, they will say they could see it coming, they anticipated it, and they simply weren't prepared to deal with it. And then, what's happened now is, I think you've even got some Democrats admitting that, they understand what's happening and the influx is there and it's continuing to build. And that's why I'm scared to death if somehow the vice president is elected president. That message is going to be very clear to everyone out there.
Well,
and the last time I was in Tucson, I was with Border Patrol agents myself and Andy Biggs, Congressman Biggs, and there were Chinese nationals that were coming across that they had contact with just the day before. And we sat down and talked to them. There were 4 individuals. They don't make any bones about it either. They say they're where they came. They flew into Toronto from Beijing. They went from Toronto down to McAllen, Texas. They landed there, and then they were processed. So this stuff continues to happen. It's just mind-boggling.
It is infuriating, and as we've learned, there are 190 countries on the entire globe, but we've seen illegals coming in, filtering in from 180 different countries. This group of people that's even waiting in Mexico. There are people from Ghana, from China, etc. But this story reveals, obviously, it was a lengthy story. I forget exactly the source, or I'd tell the audience, but of course, they talk to people who are hoping, the illegals are hoping that Kamala Harris wins this. They want to get up here before Trump might win. But the story also revealed that there are about 200,000 or so more foreigners that are bottled up near the Mexico-Guatemala border because the Biden regime asked Mexico to hold them there until the elections were over. Mexico's socialist president agreed. So for about 10 months, this bottleneck of humanity hasn't really been allowed to move northward in an attempt to trick Americans into thinking this border regime, this border crisis is kind of dealt with. Harris and Biden have dealt with it. They haven't. It's another game. It's another game being played, and what's infuriating is the American people are literally being lied to and tricked here by their own presidential administration.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if you talk to somebody in the Ninth Circuit, that's part of the San Diego sector, that is where there is the most cross traffic on a daily basis of people coming in from Mexico and actually some U.S. citizens that work in Mexico. They are completely overwhelmed with the amount of smuggling that's happening down there, and they know that the buildup is happening, and what they're anticipating is they've been talking to the Ninth Circuit about how can we expedite some of these cases. Because really what's happening is there's an influx. They come in, they're there for 72 hours, and then they're still released. I mean, that's still happening every day of the week. Yeah. That has not changed. The only thing that will change that is to actually have, obviously, to have Donald Trump elected as president. But I think the other thing that would have to happen is Congress would have to come together quickly. So it's a heavy lift. I mean, we're going to have to keep the majority in the House, and you're going to have some very quick movement over in the U.S. Senate to come up with something that is a physical security border type bill, not the immigration stuff that the U.S. Senate and that Senator Langford was negotiating, something that is actually going to stop the flow. And
you would have to have at least a few Democrats, I assume, in the Senate. A few Democrats in the Senate go along with that to get past the filibuster. And I think
there's enough pressure out there on them that there would be some movement on that. I really do.
Well, that's interesting. So just anything else to add that we didn't cover before I let you go here?
No, I think the one thing that we're trying to get out of this hearing in Milwaukee today is we want to talk a little bit about kind of the cross-section of issues that are going on across the state. And I think it's an opportunity that's unique and wouldn't happen if we didn't have members of the Judiciary Committee in Wisconsin and able to do this today. So it's a good opportunity for us.
It is. Well, have a good hearing, and thank you for being on the show this morning. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake.